Okay, in this lecture, we're going to have actually a nice change of pace and have something fairly short to talk about. At this point, as we're learning the International Phonetic Alphabet, we're going to start out by making the distinction between vowels and consonants. It may seem fairly easy at first, but nothing's that easy in phonetics. So vowels are more than just A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y, or whatever you may have been told before. And one thing we have to think about when we think about sounds is how they're produced. This is how we make these distinctions in phonetics. So we have this group of speech sounds we call consonants. And you may associate those with letters of the alphabet right now, but as technically defined, consonants are speech sounds produced with a relatively closed vocal tract. Right? Usually there's something that's going to be closed somewhere along that track that you learned about earlier, all the way. We have air traveling up through our lungs, through our larynx, all the way to our lips. Anywhere in that range, there could be something completely closed off or almost completely closed off. And that's what makes a consonant. And consonants are also easy to classify because we can pinpoint where our tongue is pretty precisely. And our tongue will make contact with something for a lot of sounds we call consonants. Let's take the sound T as an example. T, T. If you can feel where your tongue goes when you go T, 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 you can feel it goes right behind your teeth. If we look at our chart, we can see a T that's over here, and that actually refers to that sound we just practiced. And you'll also notice that not only have move this, in this group of consonants that I'm trying to point out from our IPA chart, included some that are here. They say consonants and pulmonic, and that just means that there's air coming from the lungs. We'll get more into that in the next lecture. But there's actually a second group of consonants that look probably totally alien to you because they don't look much like the letters we're used to using when we're spelling words. Those are also consonants because they also involve constrictions along the vocal tract. All right, now on to vowels. Now, in contrast with vowels, contrast with consonants, you have vowels that are, if you're thinking about consonants, sort of the opposite. They are produced with a relatively open vocal tract. So that means there isn't any constrictions or tightenings or narrowings. Sometimes they do get pretty narrow, but not as narrow as consonants. And one of the vowels that you'll notice down here, you'll notice some things that look like A's. One of those is right here. We have ah, which is what your doctor has you say when he or she wants to look down your throat. And that's because your throat's nice and open. You can see way back there. It's just an illustration of how open vowels are compared to consonants. And because vowels involve tongue movement where the tongue isn't really up against another structure, like that T sound we talked about before where the T is behind the back of the teeth, vowels are a little bit trickier to classify. All right, so just a reminder that when we talk about vowels having an open vocal tract and consonants having a closed vocal tract, that we're talking about anywhere between the lips. One of the consonants that we'll talk about is the M sound, where your lips are completely closed. It's a nice illustration of how the vocal tract can be closed off. So anything between the lips all the way down to the laryngeal area here. We really can't close off our trachea or anything, sort of heading to the lungs. not voluntarily, and it's a bad thing when that happens. So normally we're going to just think of the vocal tract most of the time as between the lips and the larynx. All right, so to summarize and talk about a few other things we haven't discussed, let's compare and contrast vowels and consonants. So vowels have an open vocal tract, while consonants are closed or nearly closed. All right, and also you can look at things in terms of where things get closed or open as well. Most of the time we can sort of divide our body down the middle. So I'm going to use something here that's supposed to be like our tongue. And I didn't get my line very well precisely in the middle, so try and imagine that's in the middle. Right, so when you look at vowels as opposed to consonants, even with a vowel, you have your tongue up high in the mouth. You usually have that space there in the middle along where I've tried to draw a line, sort of in this area. I'm going to just thicken that line so it looks a little bit more in the middle. Usually you'll have some sort of path, and this is where air travels out down that tongue, right down the middle. And that's part of the open vocal tract. Whereas in consonants, usually you have some sort of closure there along that midline. All right, so if you were to take your body and slice it exactly in half, somewhere along that line is where you're going to place your tongue to make that closure, like that. You'll notice it happens in the middle. It's not like you put your tongue to the side and you close and make that sound with like the edge of your tongue. You're using the middle of the tongue and the tip of your tongue as well. Right, so that distinction along the midline is another important property that distinguishes vowels and consonants. Now, vowels also have another interesting property, is that they are normally always voiced, which means those vocal folds are always buzzing in your throat. So if you say ah, e, o, and you have your fingers on your throat, you're going to feel that buzzing. While consonants can be either voiced or not. So I'm going to write a plus or a minus. Some have voicing with it, like zzz. You can feel the buzzing in your throat while you buzz like a bee, or if you hiss like a snake, zzz, you're not going to feel any buzzing. So consonants can go either way. And we also talk about vowels as being more intense. As in sort of like loud. They're not intense as in like, you know, your boyfriend is really intense when he looks in your eyes. Not that kind of intense, but they tend to be louder than consonants. Most consonants are a little bit quieter compared to the vowels. All right, forgive my handwriting here. I'm still getting used to writing with this thing. Okay, so vowels are a little bit louder, and we also say they're more sonorous. And our consonants are going to be less sonorous. And what I mean by sonorous is a little difficult to explain. You can think of it in a way as musical. Right? So when you sing, you often hear like, ah, that kind of quality. You're not hearing singers going on like really long, like focusing on those S sounds. What really sticks out are the vowels. And you know, that's because those vowels do work well for singing. You don't have your vocal folds vibrating during a lot of consonants, so they don't have that musical song-like quality to them. All right, now that I can put away my pen, that does it for this topic. So when you do your warm-up, there's not going to be too much to this, but let me know if there's anything that you're wondering that you can't quite explain in your head about the difference between vowels and consonants. And we're not thinking of letters anymore, we're thinking of sounds. So we're going to learn in more detail how all these sounds are produced. But this will get you started on making those distinctions as we go and talk about each of these things in more detail.